Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I have a lot of bad shit to talk about in this intro. And for the first time in forever, it has nothing to do with me or my family. This time it has to do with the ski community, the Tahoe community, plus the friends and family who suffered a huge loss with the passing of Kyle Smain. This loss is a huge shock to the whole ski industry. I've met Kyle a couple times, but I don't know him. But from all the tributes I've read, he was one of the most stoked and positive people, and he really loved skiing, and he wasn't afraid to tell you about that often. Death in the mountain sucks, and we always say they died doing what they loved to do, and while that's always partially true, the real truth is, the people we lose in the mountains while doing rad shit, they don't 100% die doing what they loved. Because what all of them loved most was living. And these heroes of ours that we've lost, it does give me a little bit of comfort knowing that they really did live and experienced a lot of things that none of us will ever have the opportunity to do so. So while Kyle is gone and that is painful for so many people and it's a huge loss, he did get to experience a whole lot in his short life. So goodbye, Kyle. I'm thinking about your friends and your family, and I know it totally sucks. And you know what else totally sucks about death in the mountains? Is that it always seems like it's the best people that are the ones to go. You never hear about that skier who was a total dick, who was killed in a slide. I mean, why do the assholes always live? Who knows? Speaking of assholes, what the fuck is going on with the Outside magazine empire? First, they buy everything in media, it seems like. Then they lay off a shit ton of good people. Then they kill titles. And the icing on the cake is their incredibly poorly timed new platform, the Outerverse, that is now dead. Here is where they tried to dupe readers with the great 2022 NFT scam and the idea to create an online platform to reward you for your real-world exercise or something like that. It was fucking dumb from day one, and they spent a shit ton of money on things like scavenger hunts and a free Jack Johnson concert for like 69 people who bought into this whole thing and were in New York City at that time. The whole Outerverse could be something that works in the future, but it's not going to be for years to come. Needless to say, an old stale outdoor media company shouldn't be the one launching new unproven tech, but that's not even why I'm bummed on Outside. I'm pissed because they killed the Warren Miller movie. Sure, they're going to recycle footage for the 74th iteration of the film, but they're cutting out filmers, athletes, and marketers who have spent their careers bleeding for the Warren Miller name and movie. And knowing that Outside will still get sponsorship dollars and ticket sales for the movie and put it all towards their bottom line without giving anything back to the infrastructure, the athletes, and the filmers, it just makes me sick. While they say things are going to be back to normal in 2 years with the 76th edition of the movie, I don't believe it. This is a group that has lied, deceived, and not delivered so many times, and I believe they're going to do the exact same thing again. They've done so many great things, but they've also done so much to tear down an industry in just a few short years. It's so dumb, and the fact is that for the first time in over 70 years, outside of COVID, there won't be a new Warren Miller movie. Warren must be rolling over in his grave again, I'm sure. And I could keep going and going because there's so much more I have to complain about the outdoor magazine empire, but that's enough for this week. Like I said with my Powder magazine prediction long ago, that was the correct prediction. I don't think Outside magazine and its other titles will be in business 5 years from now, unless something drastically changes at the top. Whether it's content, titles, or even the articles they publish on social media, they can't stop shooting themselves in the foot. They're seriously pissing off the readers, and the amount of comments saying that readers are canceling their subscriptions is something I've never seen in a magazine before. So that's the slow death of Outside, and I will continue to monitor that on the podcast. The next thing I should talk about this week is the X Games, but I need more time to really take everything in and comprehend what I witnessed. I mean, it was different, and that's to be expected when ESPN sold its majority interest in the X Games to a VC group about 4 months ago. So there were major changes, and they were all very noticeable. It was so great to see Salema back at the helm, and the athletes absolutely crushed it, especially the women. But I'm almost confused with what happened with the rest of the production. Between the influencers, the constant glitches, and the overall unpreparedness the event seemed to have, it was kind of a joke to me. But I, like many of you, make up the small percentage of people that make these sports a lifestyle. And it's serious to us, so it was frustrating watching that coverage. But the masses may have loved all the fake influencer bullshit, and it may help grow the sports. So while I agree with Todd Richards' take that this whole thing was a total joke, Maybe it was a total joke to the 20% of us who really care about things. That's why I'm going to continue to process what I witnessed before spending a whole intro talking about what happened at the X Games. Or maybe the X Games never comes up again on this podcast. Who knows? Enough complaining for me right now. You can bet I'll have more of that next week. But now it's time for some thank yous, and I need to thank a future guest of mine. Josh Lubeck owns Nema Vitamins. I use them to help me lose 40 pounds a couple years ago, and I still take a pill every day. And I'm still down 35 pounds from my old fat self. So I really swear by Nema, it really does work. And if you don't know much about Josh, well, he was a legendary skier too. And I'm going to talk to him next week or the week after. I'm not really sure how that's going to go. But he was so generous that he's going to give you 20% off your NemaBrand.com order when you enter the code POWEL25. That's all lowercase and the number 25, no spaces at checkout. I don't get anything from the codes that I give out on this podcast. I just really believe in the products that I represent, and Nema really works. You know what else really works? Really, really hard? My guest this week. And really, more people should have been talking about this guy over the years, because Micah Evangelista is a machine. But he's not a household name, and that's because he's definitely not a self-promotional machine. Micah Evangelista is the underground skier king of Mount Baker. He spent his whole life charging the incredible terrain that Baker has to offer, and along the way, he's developed a powerful yet graceful go-huge style and a massive trick vocabulary that was learned the old-fashioned way. Singles, doubles, and triples into POW, with Mount Baker as his backdrop. Micah is looked at as the top of the pyramid when it comes to the new school Mount Baker shredders. But at the same time, he's been under the radar his whole career, and on the podcast, we find out why. Before we get into it, it's time for me to ask you to tell a friend about the podcast. I was just at Mission Ridge for an industry ski demo, and it was all ski retailers and manufacturers, and even there, only 10% knew about the show. And I will say, I felt like a total douchebag explaining to people that I had a podcast and I wanted them to listen to it, but they were happy to hear my spiel, and I'm sure all of them will be listeners for a long time. So please tell a friend about the show, as I really don't have the time or the manpower to tell everyone. Finally, I only work with the best brands in the industry, and some of these brands have money-saving codes in their ads, and it's a real savings for you if you use them. So please listen to the ads in the podcast and support the brands that make this show happen. They are Elon Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Puffin Drinkware, Outdoor Research, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Now, it's time to chat with Micah Evangelista. It sounds like you've been pretty busy building a tiny home lately. Are you building this for yourself?
Yeah, man, I am. It's for my girlfriend and I. We have had the idea. I've wanted to do it for a long time, I guess, a handful of years, just like seeing what Zach Giffen, who's a local in the Mount Baker area, has done, and just seeing other people do it. It seemed like a cool direction to take in terms of owning a house of my own.
Was Zach doing that as a career at one point?
Yeah, I mean, now it's kind of his full-time thing as he kind of fades away from skiing as much. I know he still loves skiing, but it's kind of his gig. He was actually on a Netflix show called Tiny House Nation, and he was like the host on that, and it was really rad. And he built out tiny houses, and yeah, they had a few seasons on I think it's on Netflix. So yeah, he's been doing that for years, and he did the original like Outdoor Research tiny house probably 10 years ago, and they took it around in the winter and went up to BC and stuff. So that was always cool to see and inspiring. But yeah, we started up this last summer and wanted to get one up for ourselves to live in, and just been working away on it all summer, and now into the winter, still working on the inside, getting it finished up. But yeah, it's been a fun project for sure.
Do you have a bathroom and a shower in the tiny home?
We do. It's a pretty full-on tiny house. We kind of maxed out the sizing for what can be driven down a road. We went a little bit wider. We went 10 feet wide instead of 8.5 feet, and 14 feet tall, and it's got a full bathroom and shower, and actually has like a washer and dryer and
whoa,
the full amenities. It'll be pretty much fully livable, which is a goal we had with it. We didn't want to have to go to a laundromat or do laundry at my folks' place or anything like that. So we're pretty stoked to have a full setup in it. It'll be pretty cool when it's all said and done.
Have you been with your girlfriend long enough where you can take a huge dump in the small tiny house and not be embarrassed?
So that's huge, man. I mean, I had to insulate the interior walls to soundproof it a bit, but we've been together for 3 years at this point, going on 3 years, and we're pretty comfortable in a small space together, and we've got a dog as well, and I think it'll be cozy, it'll be tight, but it'll be really fun, and just for us to kind of have our own space that's not like a rental or, something really short term is a cool step for us. And yeah, man, we're both really excited, but that's definitely a thing. We got to soundproof it. At first she's like, it's a tiny house. I don't know if we really need like a door to the bathroom. There could just be like a curtain or something. And I'm like, I got to disagree with that. So we got the door on it. Or we don't have it yet, but we will. And it'll be a cool space for sure.
So you're going to be able to take this tiny house mountain town to mountain town. And the mountains are pretty much where you were born and raised. And that's where your folks meet. They meet in Jackson Hole. Were they both born in Jackson, or did they move there because of the love of the mountains?
They moved there. They were both born. They moved around a lot growing up. My dad was born on the East Coast, and my mom grew up in Wisconsin, and they both had moved around quite a few times until they met, and they both just started to develop a love for the mountains that the rest of their family didn't have as much, I want to say, growing up. My dad is one of 7 kids, and my mom has 3 brothers. So there's a big family, but they were the ones who wanted to seek out the mountains a little bit more. So they both went to Jackson Hole on their own. Ended up there in different circumstances, but met there and both kind of started skiing together. And my mom just kind of learned to ski there, and they both fell in love with it, I think. So it took off for them there. And that's kind of what brought them to this area of Mount Baker. It's just another step in that direction of being really surrounded by some amazing mountains and good snowfall and everything like that.
Was the idea to kind of go to Glacier and it's like you're an hour from a real city and at the same time you're in the mountains and totally remote as well?
Yeah, I think it just kind of worked out that way where I don't think they really knew about Glacier, but they just like had come to the general area and had, I think, been up to Mount Baker a few times. And I don't think it was like, oh, we have to be in Glacier in this remote town, but I just think they just drove out here. I remember them telling the story about it a little bit and driving out here and then just being like, wow, this is epic. I don't think I think they were thinking Bellingham a little bit too, because it just is a little more known what they had heard of and knew about, but they came out here and yeah, it just opened their eyes up a little bit, I think. And they just said, this is really badass and seems like a great place for us to try to get a house. And they came across a really cool house that I grew up in and just got it for, at the time was really good price. It's changed a lot since then out here as it has everywhere, but they got an awesome place and it's right kind of in quote unquote downtown Glacier, which is pretty funny because it's a tiny town, but it's a great spot. So I'm stoked they made their way out here and it worked out really well for the whole family.
And when you think about parents being crazy, and I'm not calling your parents crazy by any means, but I think about like ski parents being crazy, getting their kids out into the mountains when they're 2 and 3 years old. I know I took my kid out when he was that young, but your parents were totally batshit crazy. And your first ski day was like when you were 6 days old or something like that.
Seriously, man. Yeah, they were getting after it with us. I don't remember the exact age, but they said it was, within a few weeks of being born and had me in the backpack. Which is awesome story, but it's also pretty funny because it's like, man, that's some ballsy moves to have your very, very infant newborn on your chest or your back or something. My dad was Italian at the time too, so surprised he was able to stay on his 2 feet, and it's like, I think it was just an awesome thing for them to do. They love it, but they're not like so diehard that it's the only thing that matters. But I think just being out here, they do love being in the mountains. They love to ski, so it just made sense for them to try to get us out there with them right away. And it's not like they were like pushing us at all. It was just like, we want to ski on the weekends because they're teaching at the time. They're school teachers and, weekends off together. So let's get the kids out and have a day of it.
And you have an older brother. I think, what's he, 3 or 4 years older than you?
Yeah, Mattias. He's 3 years older than I am. We're really close, really cool relationship as brothers. And yeah, it's been a good time growing up, having an older brother kind of looking after you. I've really appreciated it.
So you've got this family unit in Glacier and your parents are school teachers. So do you have to like commute to Bellingham every day to go to school? Are you in the car a couple hours a day?
Yeah. So it's cool. In elementary school and like middle school and stuff, there's actually an elementary school about 10 minutes from Glacier.
Okay.
On the way towards Bellingham. So that was really nice access. And that's actually where my mom taught for 20 something years as a kindergarten teacher there. So that was where I went to elementary school, super accessible. And then middle school and high school was a little bit further, but still not all the way to Bellingham. So it's about 20 minutes in this little town called Deming. So I'd take the bus there. And then once I was in 11th grade, they had this program called Running Start. And me and a handful of my buddies all did that program. And it allows you to go to the community college instead of going to high school, which was really cool. Like, awesome program. So that was taking us to Bellingham, but I was able to pretty much only go 3 days a week from 11th and 12th grade. So I was able to ski more, which was a great opportunity, and not drive to town every day. Because it is, 45 minutes is not bad, but when you're going back and forth every day, it adds up a little bit. So that was a really cool program. I was able to ski and jam back and forth for school and not be at the high school, which was just a cool change of pace, and get college credits too. So that was really fun.
Nice. And I imagine life in Glacier as an existence where you're constantly chopping wood, managing snow, and doing hard work. And everybody I talk to about you, they say you have like the strongest work ethic of any of your friends. And is that how it develops? Just like all the shit that you have to do in Glacier to make life work? Or can you pinpoint what makes you work so hard in life?
That's awesome. Yeah. I think there is some of that. It's not like so rugged where you're having to haul water to and from there, but it was chopping firewood. We had a wood stove and did a lot of firewood stacking. And hey, my mom is still doing it by herself a lot of time. I've been able to help more, but she gets after it. So I think that kind of instilled my work ethic too from both of my folks. They've done it as long as I have been able to see. They've been doing that kind of stuff and working hard. And yeah, I think I just kind of picked up on that. Having to be in Glacier, yeah, not everything is easily accessible. It's not all right next door, so you're having to work a little harder to get things or do work around the house in the little yard here. So yeah, that was good practice. And then once I was like 15 or 14, 15, I had to get a job. So I was washing dishes at the local restaurant and stuff, and just kind of earning my own keep a little bit. They were super supportive with skiing and, helped out a lot. But once I was a little bit older, it certainly wasn't like, all right, we're going to send you off to go to ski school and travel and do all that. It was like, all right, I'm going to get a job and make my own money and go from there and try to take that into skiing and save up money in the summers to be able to ski a lot in the winter. And yeah, I think that definitely shaped my work ethic in those early years.
And I bring up work ethic as there's a lot of things everybody had to say about you, but one thing everybody said is you're the dude that's going to outwork everyone just because that's who you are. And it's like, if you guys are going to go build out the road gap and it's 4:30 in the morning and you wake up, you're going to go break trail, get up to the road gap and start building. And the rest of the crew might show up when it's daylight out and you've got everything almost done. And that's just how you operate. Is that fair to say about you?
That's funny. Yeah, that's definitely can be the case. I think it is the case most times. It takes me some extra effort to get up out of bed that morning. It's certainly not like I just fly out of bed. The alarm goes off and I'm like, oh man. But, I am fired up to do it. And I like going up and being up there early before there's a ton of traffic going up to the hill and just seeing the sun come up and stuff. I mean, I don't do it all the time. I can't always do the sunrise mission, but when I know we want to shoot something or we kind of have a day planned, I'm more than happy to get up early and check things out. And I like kind of scoping out conditions too. And it just allows me to kind of have an idea of what we're going to do that day. And if I can start building the jump and think about some tricks and how the landing is. And, I don't like rolling up to something at the last minute and just feeling like, oh, got to hit it now, try to get a shot. I kind of like to settle in and warm up for the day. So I do love doing that. I've friends, my good friend Sophia, we have a pretty good ongoing joke about it of, we'll be hitting the home run gap, road gap for her first time. And I just want to hit it, but I want to build a good jump for her to hit it too. And it's just a fun camaraderie to be up there and lead someone in for their first time and have it be super solid and dialed. So yeah, I take pride in doing that and being up early, working hard to get it right. And then I do think during a session or something, I definitely kind of turn into a little bit of an Energizer bunny and can kind of keep going and hit a jump and crash a bunch of times or, whatever, and want to land something. And I can kind of just keep going. Something kicks in, different gear kicks in that doesn't really kick in other parts of life, which is really cool with skiing. But that's definitely something I've noticed over the years for sure.
And I also hear that you're always the one to break trail. Like there are no questions. You're so stoked to be out there that you're just going to go. And everybody can try to keep up with you, but it usually doesn't happen.
I will for sure. I mean, I feel like the crews I'm out with, we'll usually do a pretty good job of trading off. But, same thing if my buddy with the camera on his backpack or friends who, aren't quite as used to breaking trail on a really deep day, I'm more than happy to do it because once I'm out there, it's like, I just don't really mind. It's a lot of hard work and you're exhausted after. But when you're out there, I don't mind. I don't mind breaking trail and setting a good skin track. Especially when I'm in this area around Mount Baker, I feel like I just know the terrain really well and have just kind of come to know safe places to approach and stuff like that. So I don't mind. I really enjoy it. I love breaking trail and setting skin tracks, especially I think there's not much more satisfying than setting a really good skin track. It looks great. It's fun to see other people, follow you up in it. So yeah, I enjoy it, man. It's part of the experience for me.
Can you think of a day, or do you ever have those days where you're just not feeling it, but you're out with like an all-time crew and you feel like you're the dude slowing the group down? Or does that shit not happen with you?
No, it totally happens. I mean, we were up in Canada last spring and we're just kind of touring around the Rogers Pass area of, Revelstoke, Rogers Zone, that kind of interior BC. And, not slowing people down, I wouldn't say, but like having a day where you're like doing these massive approaches and you get up there and all right, we got a few hours of daylight. Let's try to get a few lines each and then crash down a line. And, and then the morale's just a little shot, and it's hard to be like the person that wants to just like lead the charge and kind of be that person when you're just kind of having a rough day. So those happen. I had a couple last spring where it's just like, you're just bumming a little bit and you're working so hard. I don't have a snowmobile or anything, so it's all foot powered for the most part. So those exhausting days where you get up there, you work your butt off, you get up really early, and then it doesn't go your way. It happens, and trying to always take it in stride. But, there's some days I can get bummed out, but usually try to have a great attitude and just know you're out there for the fun of it. So usually I'm able to bounce back, but there's 1 or 2 days a year where you're bumming and having a rough go of it for sure.
And it sounded like that Revelstoke trip last year was like one of the worst, maybe not worst, but one of the most challenging trips that you had been on in years, like the whole thing.
Yeah, it was tricky, man, for sure. I mean, it definitely wasn't the worst trip, and I wouldn't say it was bad. Like, I look back on it super fondly, but it is hard. I mean, when you're doing like a little film project and you're trying to pack in a lot of filming into like a 2.5 week span. And for us, it's like, we're not skiing the park or anything. We're just skiing powder and skiing in the backcountry. So if conditions aren't good, you're just kind of like, not much else you can do. You're twiddling your thumbs, trying to make the best of it and ski in the rain or whatever it is. Like, the first week and a half of the trip was just really bad weather. And we were in Nelson for a few days and it was just raining on us to the summit. And, we're trying to follow the snow, but it's a tricky thing. So it was a tricky trip, but like the last 4 or 5 days, it just turned around completely and dumped a lot. So that made it, without that, then I probably would have said it was the worst trip in a long time. But because of those days we had at the end, it made it all worth it, I think. And those are the days you remember more so than the rainy ones.
And on trips like that, I mean, does it feel like you put all this work in way ahead of time to just get the crew together, to plan out this trip, to get the budget? And then when the weather doesn't work out and everything's kind of not lining up, does it feel like you're just pissing away the money that you worked so hard to go on a trip with?
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, I have expectations for it. Like, can't help but just like watch other videos of people in similar zones and just like see awesome pillow lines and stuff that you're like kind of been dreaming of skiing for a long time. And then, for me, like the last little project we did, the Confluence video, I spent pretty much the whole summer before making like a pitch deck and, kind of planning out what we could do. And I did pretty much all of kind of that planning side of things with the help of Sophia too. We both kind of were doing it. But yeah, you spend a lot of time planning stuff out and trying to map everything out and get money and line up someone to come and film. And there's so many steps, and then you're just rolling a dice with the weather. And that's the thing about skiing that's so tricky, but so gratifying when it works out. But, it was hard for sure. It's just like, all right, putting all of your eggs in one basket and hoping that it comes through and delivers. And you never really know until you're there, so it was a challenge.
And any skier who's done any personal projects like this knows that stress of like, hopefully the weather's going to line up because I've got all my eggs in this basket. And At least you got a few good days there. But to get back onto the work ethic question, or my last question relating to that, have you ever run into someone more stoked or more fired up or wanting to put in more work than you? Like, who is that person?
Oh, definitely, man. I mean, it's hard for me to like single out one person in my mind right now, but I see people that are going up and seeing stuff on social media too of people skiing every single day, no matter what the conditions are. And there's some friends locally who absolutely get after it and they just love it so much. And I do love to ski, but like I call myself a little more of a fair weather skier.
Okay.
Like a kind of a 6-inch and up type. I mean, I love skiing every day, but especially when I got these other projects on the radar, I'll be kind of, if it's a little bit icy today, I'll probably just stick home and work on the house project or something. So I see people locally and on a larger scale who are just like so fired up to ski every single day. And I think when we're out there on a good day, I kind of am as fired up as anyone. Once you're up there and you're shooting or you're, hiking a backcountry line or whatever, I think. But just seeing people have the motivation to go up every day is inspiring, and it makes me want to do it even on the days that don't look like it's that great of skiing conditions. So yeah, I love seeing that. I love seeing people who just, love it no matter what, whether they're filming or not. They just want to be up there in the mountains and stuff. So yeah, it keeps me motivated for sure.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things out with Best Day Brewing. Yeah, I love a good craft beer, but finally, I found a full-flavored, full-bodied, full-aromaed craft beer without the alcohol to slow me down. Because really, life is full of moments that deserve a great beer, but not the booze. And the blind taste tests I've done prove that you won't be able to tell the difference between a Best Day and your favorite IPA or Kolsch. What I really love about Best Day is that I get a low-calorie, low-sugar brew that goes perfect with driving home. Whether you're an athlete, a desk jockey, a biker, an entrepreneur, a runner, a walker, a hiker, a skier, a snowboarder, you deserve to have your best day yet too. So next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day Brewing, and if you can't find some at the store, you can always head on over to bestdaybrewing.com to get yourself a 6-pack of tasty flavor. My next sponsor is Puffin Drinkware. What's a puffin? Think a parka, a spacesuit, a life jacket for your beverage that's built with insulation technology, complete with a thermal liner for colder sips to the very last drop. Yeah, a puffin will keep your drink cold until the last drop, but it'll also make you the king or queen of whatever room or party you're in, as everyone's going to notice your puffin and start asking you questions about it. And while you're going to want to answer all of their questions about that parka or life vest or spacesuit or countless other silhouettes that Puffin creates, you and everyone else will be focused on talking about how cute your personality-infused beverage apparel is. And I want every one of you to head over to puffindrinkware.com to pick up a puffin for yourself. You need one of these. And while you're at it, buy one for a friend and have fun together. And Puffin is going to make that easier than ever for you to do. They're going to save you 20% off all Puffin orders, and all you need to do is go shopping at puffindrinkware.com, and when you head to checkout, enter the code POWELMOVEMENT, that's all lowercase, all one word, no spaces, and you will save 20% off your Puffin drinkware, and you'll have the cutest drinkware in the entire planet. My final sponsor is Elan Skis, and I'm in love with both my Ripsticks 106 Black Edition and my Ripsticks 96 Black Edition. They are so fun and lively, all while remaining light and stable. And I'm not the only person who thinks these skis ski better than the competition. Both of these skis were named the editor's pick in Free Skiers magazine test this year. And combined, Elan won over 65 awards in 2022. Great products is why you're seeing more Elan skis on the hill. And making you a better skier is how they've been building a cult following here in the US. But what's really amazing about the brand is that they built a solar power plant on top of their state-of-the-art factory, which means Elan is powered by renewable energy. They've also shortened the supply chain, and now 70% of Elan's materials come from within 250 miles of their factory. And the innovative digital printing technology they're using has already saved 32 tons of volatile waste since 2016. To find out more about all things Elan, head on over to elanskis.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Mount Baker has an amazing community around it.
Totally.
It's one of those places where, or is it one of those places where everybody knows everyone?
Definitely. I would say for the most part. I mean, there's a few different pools of people here. You know, there's kind of the older generation who have been here for a longer time. And then there's also the kind of people in their late 20s, early 30s who have just kind of discovered it over the last 5-10 years. And that kind of cycles. I think over, a handful of years, people will come and be here for a few years, a handful of years, and then maybe move on elsewhere. But yeah, I think at this point, it's like everyone knows everyone. I mean, for the most part, there's these like gated housing communities up the road where people have like a bunch of vacation rentals and stuff. So people kind of come and go. But I would say with the core local group who's living here, it's a pretty tight community. And my girlfriend Eliza works at the Wake and Bakery, which is right here in Glacier. It's the one shop that's open every day. And that's a cool hub for a lot of people to come through and get their coffee in the morning and stuff. So you see a lot of familiar faces there. And I think, for the most part, everyone is out here because they want to be skiing or snowboarding as much as they can, just like being in the mountains, like living in the forest and stuff out here. So I think it brings a lot of like-minded people, a lot of kooky people, but that's not a bad thing. I think that's just part of being in a little mountain town. So yeah, it's cool. I like it out here a lot. I've been out here for a long time, so I'm not sure if it's a place that I will be. It's hard to say. It's been hard to find another place to move to because this is such an awesome area. I just love Northwest Washington a lot. But we'll see. We got the tiny house on wheels at this point, and it's pretty big, so it's not super mobile. But maybe in the next couple years, we'll end up trying to get our own property elsewhere and move on. But for now, it's a really special spot.
Special to you, but also just snowboard history and culture. Like,
oh, man.
Baker is a hub of that. And are you at the bank slalom every year and part of all the big snowboard shit that happens, even though you're a skier?
I love being up there. I mean, usually by February, conditions are pretty good. So we'll be out like skiing or filming, doing whatever sometimes during the events. But I love coming back. People are hanging out in the lodge and there's all the shenanigans going on. It's just such a fun weekend, and it's awesome that I think it's going to be really good this year because hasn't really been able to take place the last couple of years since COVID.
Right.
Certainly not to its full extent. So it certainly has felt like years since it really went off like it used to. So it's just got so much rich snowboard history here, and here on a really local basis. Craig Kelly spent a lot of time here, and Lucas DeBari, who's a great family friend of ours growing up, was super inspiring. He was the guy that I look to as the raddest dude on a local level. So awesome to have that history here and those roots and stuff. Like in such a small town, there's a lot of talent, I think, and a lot of just really devout riders. So it's pretty cool to see.
You brought up Lucas DeBari, and he was a huge talent, and you said local level, but he was on his way to becoming like a global phenomenon in snowboarding. And then he pulled all the reins in. Like he did like a total Mount Baker. I'm going to be myself and not share myself with the world and just live on my own. It felt like. I don't know what his mindset was, but the plate was set for him to have snowboarding in the palm of his hands, and he decided to take a different route.
Right. I know. It was crazy to see. I think it kind of blew our mind a little bit. We were watching his video parts, and he was doing, I think, Deeper or Further, whichever one it was with Jeremy Jones. And he was in a couple of those and, was crushing it at like Supernatural and stuff. And all those events, he was killing it. His video parts were like amazing. He was getting up there to like top 20, snowboarders in the world, I feel like, and just so much natural ability. And it's such a strong dude, just that kind of short, stocky build, super strong. And, I won't speak to his reasoning behind it, but I think he was getting kind of spooked getting up into some of those massive Alaska zones. And I think he just kind of wanted to reel it in. But I haven't really been able to connect with him in the recent years about it and talk about what changed for him. But I think he just kind of started climbing a lot more and kind of slowing the pace down a little bit and not wanting to always be so gripped, which when you're snowboarding in Alaska throughout the winter, you're pretty gripped all the time.
His career is not going to get more chill. It's only going to get more gnarly when you start doing that.
Absolutely. I feel like that's kind of the transition after you're like a youngster and you're hitting jumps in the trees a lot. And then you start to become buddies with Jeremy and the people who are like just next level gnarliness. So I think, that was kind of as it was naturally building for him. But again, I can't speak to what exactly clicked for him, but it just kind of seemed like as it was just ready to say, you know what, I've had a good run and I'm going to start climbing. And he's got a kid now. And it seems like he made the best of a rad short career.
Yeah, he definitely did it. And he lived and he traveled and then he lived to do other shit, which is pretty awesome.
Which is huge. Yeah, that goes a long way. I mean,
yeah. I mean, especially with just like what's happened in the past week. I mean, life is very fragile and precious and it can be taken from you at any moment. So he was able to get out and he's living a great life. And when you think about being a snowboarder at Mount Baker, which you weren't, you're a skier at Mount Baker, but did you ever snowboard just because of all the history and everything? Did you ever want to get into it?
Honestly, I haven't really done it much and I still would love to. I have a handful of times just like trading with my buddies and their gear and stuff, but I never really got my own setup and I would still love to. I just feel like I was still so focused on skiing. I wasn't like at a place where I could fully dive into another sport. But now as I'm like, a little older, get 25 and not quite as super frothy as I was a handful of years ago, it's just so fun to switch up sports. And especially after knowing this mountain so well, it would be really cool, I think, to be shitty at something and rediscover different parts of the mountain that I take for granted on skis just because I've done it so many times. So I would love to, for sure. I think it'd be really fun to get a setup and be able to go for little split board missions and just rip around the resort in the spring when it's slushy and soft. So yeah, I mean, the snowboard community is still so strong here. I mean, I still think it's much stronger than, I don't want to say much stronger than the ski community. It's just, I think there's still probably more snowboarders than skiers, or it's like pretty dang close, I would say, which is pretty rare, I feel like.
You just think of every legend in snowboarding wants to go to Baker to be part of that history. I mean, you've got Patrick McCarthy there, who's like the leader of the charge, I feel like, or one of them of the next generation. And I feel like you and him are very similar, though you're like the skiing version, but like in terms of work ethic and wanting to get out there and breaking trail and everything, it's almost like you could be a younger version of that
For
guy.
sure. I know, I kind of see that. I mean, he's next level, man. He's so cool. I love Pat. He's like the nicest guy in the world. But you see him with the 686 crew, showing them all around, building the jump that he's built probably 3 dozen times over his life, but you can still hear him from like across the valley because he's so fired up.
Yeah.
And you see him do like a front 3 or like a back 3 or something, and he's still just like so stoked. And I'm like, man, that's really rad to see. I mean, that's pure love for it. And it seems like he's such a good guy too for the whole 686 crew and that whole next gen of snowboarders, which is really strong here locally in Glacier and Bellingham. There's a really cool group of absolute shredders. So it seems like they're in good hands having a guy like Pat be the guide. And it is inspiring for me too. I mean, if, however long I end up sticking around here, it's definitely a cool blueprint, I think, for trying to harness a little more camaraderie within the ski scene here. The snowboard scene is a little bit more like joined up and people are a little bit more kind of working together more. It seems like where the skiers are just everyone's kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit of a different thing. So it'd be kind of cool to look at what he's done. And it's kind of a blueprint for maybe harnessing something that's got a little bit more of a collective to it, I think. So he's super inspiring to see. He's a badass guy.
And he's an important figure to that whole community. But when you think of the whole community, you've got all kinds of skiers and snowboarders coming in for the terrain and just the history of it. And who have you had the luxury of sharing a chair or showing around Mount Baker? Between legendary skiers and snowboarders, have you been able to take people around and show them your home?
Yeah, there's been a handful of people over the years that are coming. And, I always love just hanging out with Zach Giffen just because of how long he's been here. And man, he was like one of the first guys I saw like on a consistent local basis that was just kind of getting after it and seeing video stuff as a young Grom. It's like one of the first things you see is people skiing at your home mountain. That's what really stokes you out to see how people are riding. So he was always super fun. But over the years, I mean, a lot of people have been coming. And, a couple years ago, Henrick and crew and Carl and Chris were here filming a little bit of Salute. And we showed him around the mountain a little bit and showed him some jump spots. And it was just kind of a cool thing to, ride up the lift with Henrick Harlaut at Mount Baker. Not something you exactly think would really ever happen.
Is it a source of pride for you to show him your mountain too?
Oh, it's really cool, man. I mean, a handful of years ago, I would have never thought that I would be skiing around with him. So it's a cool thing. It's a cool memory. Just such nice people, him. And I've seen Chris up here several times. Chris Logan, he's been up here the last handful of weeks and wasn't able to ski with him, but he's just a really kind dude. Caught up with him at the bakery the other day and just a lot of really nice people who want to come and ride here. And from my experiences, everyone who's wanted to come and film or be guided a little bit have been super appreciative and just so stoked. Like you come to Baker and if you get a sunny day and you can just see like the mountains around you, it's hard to not just light up,
Yeah, for sure.
Who else? I mean, Lucas was here a couple times and I love skiing with Lucas. We've become pretty close over the last couple of years. I think we've really only gotten out a handful of days, but I feel like we just click pretty well and get along really well. He's a fun guy to ski with at Baker.
And I feel like you and him are on very similar career trajectories, and I'm going to talk about it more later. But when we talk about Baker and growing up there, you don't have a terrain park. So do you learn all your tricks just off natural features and just have a huge crash reel?
Yeah, that's funny, man. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because it's something I think about a lot. And just like seeing how everyone else has come up, like a lot of great backcountry skiers now have that either park skiing or mogul skiing background. But yeah, none of that was here. We didn't have anything. I mean, there was like a race team here, which my brother and I weren't really interested in doing, but no freeride program, no terrain park or anything like that. So yeah, I think, having a trampoline in the backyard was actually huge.
Yeah.
That was super helpful just to like get comfortable being inverted and trying to like start to spin a little bit and doing like flat spins and stuff like that. That was super valuable. But yeah, there was a lot of crashing. But for me, a lot of it was just like watching videos and then just focusing on like visualization of stuff, which helped a lot actually. Because it's like I don't really get an opportunity to like practice hitting jump switch that much. And that's just like an example, like, trying to do certain spins. It's just, you got to put a lot of work in to hit a jump 4 times. So you're not just doing a couple laps through the park and getting like 30 hits, so it's definitely hard. I mean, and there's a lot of good crashes, but I think visualizing over the summer helped me a lot when I was kind of in my later teen years. I'm just seeing stuff in my head and feeling like I could set something and, just like it helped me slow things down when I was actually out there. And I would actually pick up on tricks relatively quickly, and just seeing it in my mind helped a lot. And also jumping into powder is a pretty nice way to get comfortable with stuff, pretty forgiving.
Yep.
And I'm honestly at this point way more comfortable hitting a big backcountry jump than I would be skiing through the park. So yeah, it's just what I know, what I'm comfortable with, but definitely a challenge in terms of getting really comfortable in the air and stuff. It took some time for that to click, I think. It wasn't right off the bat.
Did you ever go to Stevens or the Summit at Snoqualmie and hit their parks and just kind of get blown away with the access you could have with their little setups?
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, would only go a couple times a year. It wasn't like I'd go and just session the park all year, which probably would have been a pretty helpful thing in the long run to go and spend like a little bit more time of the winter just skiing park when it wasn't good here.
Sure.
But, it's really cool to see. I would go through and build up confidence throughout a day and hit the big jump line. And by the end, be pretty comfortable, be able to like spin a 7 or something and feel good about it. But it definitely takes time. It's a beast of its own to see those big manicured jumps. And I love seeing it. It's so fun. And then like to be there and see the scene there and see people that are just doing it all day, pretty much every day is really cool too. And I've got some friends, some really close friends who are from the Snoqualmie area. So being able to go and check that park out in Stevens Pass has always been super fun. And I haven't been to Hood in a couple years, but I really want to go this summer. And I think that's a good time to have a practice session and just catch up with people too and just kind of enjoy a good spring session there. So I love those when I'm able to get out and go.
But when you were a kid, it was all about you and your brother and handy cams and you're shooting and editing and it's learning Final Cut Pro and becoming just as passionate about putting together edits as you were about the skiing?
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, that was the transition of it. We got our first little camera, I think, and I was probably like 11 or so, 10 or 11, and my brother was 13, 14, and yeah, we just had a little camera and build little jumps off the edge of the cat track or, whatever, out just behind the rope line or something, and we just build little wedges and little piles of snow, or more so, and just try to whip backflips around off it and whip the little 360s around. And then, we'd pull it into, Final Cut. I think we had a bootleg version of Final Cut at the time. And just make these kind of funny little edits, which I laugh at pretty hard if I see pop up on the computer these days. We still feel like we still have some old files laying around. But yeah, pretty funny stuff. But really good intro for it. I mean, from there, it really just grew as it's going to as you get older. If you want to keep doing the same thing, you're just going to start to get better at it. So, it's been fun to kind of take that editing background and bring it into what I'm doing today. And I spend a fair amount of time behind the computer editing too, and that definitely laid the basis for it, I think, for sure.
You went to school for video editing at Western. I think your brother did as well. He works for Step down in California. So video editing is something that you guys are all about. But when you're coming up and you're so focused on skiing as well, I'm sure, but when you look at the videos of the day, are you actually watching and kind of seeing the aesthetics that the video editors are putting together by the time you're 15, 16? And kind of getting into that and having that affect the edits that you're doing ski-wise as well?
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, for sure. I think a lot of it was impacted by the videos we were watching a lot. Like, we watched a lot of Nimbus stuff, a lot of, Eric Pollard's work and
just the artistic, creative side of things.
Yeah, we love that. We were both a big fan of that right off the bat. But I also love just like watching ski segment, watching MSP films and stuff, and watching like young Sean Pettit and just seeing how a really good segment is built up from.
And his editing and all of his stuff that MSP didn't do, was that influential to you too? Just all the dark and weird shit that he was doing?
Definitely. Yeah, no, it was so cool. It was just kind of weird. And I think at the time you weren't seeing much of that. So that shit was all really cool to see. I mean, I personally just like seeing stuff that's a little bit different. I love all the ski movies, but at this point, I don't really watch as many full length like TGR films anymore. I kind of like watching 20-minute short pieces that are just kind of unique. I like a lot of what Jake Mageau's doing at Mango and stuff like that, where it's just kind of funky. And I think Brady Perrin's a really talented guy. So I just love watching, and I've watched a lot of that stuff over the years too. When I was a kid, I think it's transitioned more so to that style as I've gotten a little bit older. When I was younger, it was definitely more so just consistently watching the MSP movie and just seeing like, wow, this is like an epic ski film. This is what I would love to make. But for us, it was just me and him and a couple other friends. So we were just kind of like the short pieces too, because that was a little more so of what we had at our disposal and a little more similar to what we were doing. So yeah, it's been cool to see both and kind of take different styles into what I like to work on these days.
And then back then, you guys are putting together Sponsor Me edits. And I think the big thing that you did is you won a TGR Grom contest. And that was, a big deal for a young kid, I would think. But with your Sponsor Me edits that you were sending out, is that how you ended up getting Surface and BCA and Ross Reed as a sponsor?
Totally. That was a huge part of it. I mean, it's how I've gotten a lot of sponsors. It's actually how I got sponsored by Faction. Was they had like a section on the website that was like a sponsor me thing, and I submitted a video. That was probably 4 or 5 years ago now, but it's interesting here at Mount Baker, you just don't have as much of the industry scene right nearby, whereas like in places like Utah or Colorado, you might have a little more of that surrounding you. And we just didn't see that quite as much on the ski side of things. So it was definitely trying to put in work to make a little sponsor me video and let people see it and see what you're working on and kind of where your skill level was at. And I sent a bunch of them out when I was a kid. I mean, I was probably pretty shameless about it, which I think I also look back on pretty comically, but I'm also stoked on the effort I put in too, because it led me to some of the connections I've made. So it was all worth the pursuit. It just took a little extra effort, I think.
It's time for my final sponsor break, and I'm going to start this one off with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Peter Glenn has been the one-stop shop for all your ski needs since 1958 and all your snowboard needs since the sport started. And they are all about getting you out on the mountain. Peter Glenn's staff is super knowledgeable and will help you get into the right gear if you're at one of their many locations. But I get it. Not everyone's going to be able to make it to one of their retail establishments, but you can still have a great shopping experience online over at peterglenn.com. The site has all the brands, all the products, and they offer free shipping on orders of $49 or more, a no-hassle return policy, and they'll price match any reputable shop on the web. So if you find a product somewhere else, head on over to Peter Glenn, and if you can't find it cheaper there, they will price match that product that you found somewhere else so you can still support me. On top of that, Peter Glenn supports cool things in snow like this podcast, Johnny Mosley, and many more things. So please support the brand that supports me and check out Peter Glenn before you buy anywhere else. My next sponsor is Stanley, an iconic Seattle brand that has been ahead of the curve since 1913. While we all know Stanley for creating that timeless green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long, they still do that and a whole lot more these days. They're still all about adventure, they're still all about keeping your beverages hotter or colder than any other product ever created, and they've always been the right choice when it comes to the planet. If you're still using single-use plastics for your beverages, it's time to make a change for the environment. And I'm making it easier than ever to do. I'm going to save you 30% on all products from Stanley when you head on over to stanley1913.com, buy some stuff. I highly recommend the water bottle and a set of pint glasses. And when you check out, enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, all lowercase, and you'll save that 30%. My final sponsor is Outdoor Research. They've been building award-winning outerwear and gear in rainy Seattle since 1981. So for 40 years, badasses in the mountains have trusted OR gear to be the highest quality, most functional outerwear on the planet. What's exciting is that these days, the gear is still the best. You cannot compare to the quality of Outdoor Research. But when you head on over to outdoorresearch.com right now, you're going to notice some major differences. While they still make the badass technical gear you trust, they're branching out and they've hired some new designers who have their fingers on the pulse of the market to create new fits, cuts, styles, and colorways. And whether you ski or snowboard or spend your time in the park or the backcountry or the resort, Outdoor Research has something for you. And there's so much new stuff. I'm stoked because on top of their outerwear, their streetwear looks so good too. I want you to wear it all, and I'm going to make it really easy for you to do that because I'm going to save you 25% off all non-sale items over at outdoorresearch.com. And know that this code I'm about to give you, you won't be able to use it on OR Pro products, which is their military stuff. But everything else is game, and you get 25% off the best outerwear on the planet. If you've been out in the terrible conditions in OR gear, you know what I'm talking about. So when you check out at outdoorresearch.com, you're going to enter the code POWEL25. That's all capitals for Powell, the number 25, and there's no spaces in that, and you will save your 25%. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. What's weird to me is the effort that you put in back then of like trying to get yourself sponsored. It's almost like social media today. You're sending videos to people saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. I can be this, yeah. I can be this, I can be this. And you made shit happen back then. But it seems like the one thing you don't do today, or you might do it, but it doesn't seem to work as well, is that you're not doing as much of that today.
Yeah.
You know, like the self-promotion is not what makes Micah Evangelista a successful skier. It's his skiing. And it's people seeing his skiing, but if you were to self-promote, you could probably be 5 times as big as you are, but it doesn't seem like that's the way you are. And that's probably why it's comical to look back on seeing you self-promote when you were younger.
Yeah, man, for sure. I just think that, you know, there's different personalities for different people. And yeah, I just don't have a personality that necessarily wants to push it that hard. It's not that I don't want people to see it. I think when I work on something, I'm proud of something. I really love sharing it with people, but it's definitely not a constant push for me, and I just don't think about skiing that way. It's not even really a goal of mine. I wouldn't say I have like a goal to be like a super famous skier by any means. It's awesome to improve and grow in that area, and I want to. I still have the energy to do so, but it's not maybe in the same way as we see in the industry a lot with other people, and that I'm perfectly fine with that. But I do want to keep growing my own niche and do my thing and keep getting better at it. So it's definitely something I'm trying to work on too. And I enjoy being on Instagram and stuff, and I like posting. I just don't always, it's not like something I like have on my calendar to do every day. It's like, I could be chopping up a bunch of old footage and posting like all the time. And I just don't have, I'm just focused on a little bit of other things right now at this current time in my life. So I think it'll come back around, and conditions have also just been pretty bad here at Baker this year, unfortunately. So hopefully I'm able to get out in February and March and keep getting some content and starting to push stuff more and more.
Now, do you see it a problem as when you create, or maybe not a problem, but when you create content, when you get some banger clips that are going to go out in your next edit that you're going to put out at the end of the season, there's no way you're going to put any of that stuff out early, right? Like that stuff's all going to stay hidden until it comes out in your edit. And then when you put out your edits, because I look at the stuff you do between Confluence and Born and all of these artsy, soulful pieces that are beautiful. They're well shot. They're really thought out well. I mean, they're great, great pieces, but they're not what the MSP people are going to see. Maybe 10% of those people are going to see it, but it's like you're putting these things out and people have to either want to seek out a Micah Evangelista piece or stumble upon it to see it. Whereas, if you were to be pushing yourself into an MSP and been like, look at me, I want to get into an MSP type movie, your career could be 10 times as big because of just the amount of eyeballs on it. I feel like you've done everything you possibly can in skiing except for the self-promotion part.
Yeah, I think that's true. I see that firsthand, just in my own life over the last handful of years. And yeah, like we talked about the work ethic, that's all there. I just think trying to like blow it up, I just don't care that much.
It's hard to say that I'm great and you want to tell everybody you're great. I know I don't do that even with my podcast, and I should. It's hard to say, look at me.
Yeah, for sure. And over the years, I've also just, was going to school and just didn't have the ski programs and stuff to like really just fully dedicate 100% of my time to it. It wasn't like a thing where I sat down and was like, all right, I'm dropping everything and I'm going to push to be a professional skier. It was always just like something where it's like, I love skiing and I love creating ski content to, whatever extent that may be. I love getting better at skiing, and it's still one of my favorite things in the world, but there's other things too that I enjoy doing. So I think it wasn't necessarily, I'm just going to drop everything and fully commit and try to blow myself up and get in an MSP film. Like, it just never really, not to say I don't want to work hard and put out good stuff. It's just, and work for something like that. It just wasn't that much of a concern, I think, over the years. And I still think there's time. I got some years left in the industry.
You're 26, right? Or 25?
Yeah, 25. So I got a lot of time left, and I've been really good, knock on wood, about injuries. I'm usually pretty good at like making decisions to not put myself in positions of getting hurt, and I don't really have any long-standing injuries, and I am knocking on wood right now because that's a full-on jinx mid-season, but I'm happy about that. I'm happy with my decision-making a lot of the time because I'm able to ski another day and not be taking years off. And overall, I think I'm still, in a pretty good position for the long haul, and really good relationship with the people at Outdoor Research these days. And I've been able to do stuff both as a skier and also getting into filming for them and doing a little bit of mixed media stuff, which I really think is a good long-term position to have. Is I don't really ever want to put all my eggs in one basket as just being an athlete, because you could get hurt and the next day, it's like that retainer you have might not hold up. A lot of these contracts are year to year, every 2 years. And it's like, I'm looking for a little more long-term stability than that. So working on the filming and editing side of things has been a really cool way for me to feel like I can be a multifaceted asset to a company or a brand or something. So I'm definitely trying to push that more so too, and be more confident as a filmer and be able to, take on some filming jobs when I'm not trying to push skiing, like especially in the summer. So yeah, that's kind of all in the realm of what I see in the future.
That's such a refreshing take on things, because there's so many people that I talk to that their whole lives are like, they want to dream about being a pro skier and put in all the work to be a pro skier, and they do this and do that to be a pro skier. Well, you did all that shit. You just didn't have the dreams of becoming a pro skier. It was just something that you did all around. You're not being set up for disappointment. It's like everything that you're doing in skiing is a cherry on top, it seems like, of like, hey, I get to do this, I get to do that. And if you blow up and become bigger in skiing, well, more power to you. And if you don't, who cares? It's like you've been able to travel and do a ton of shit. It's pretty nice that you have that attitude towards it.
No, I appreciate that, man. And I've had dreams for sure of like being a pro skier, but it's also just being content with what I've done and being stoked and proud. Like, had some awesome trips, I've taken multiple trips to Japan. It's like a lot of people can't say that. So I feel lucky. And, there is that thing where it's like, I still don't think I've put out the video part that I'm capable of necessarily. Like, I still think given the right opportunity, being able to do an Alaska trip or something like that would be the next step in pushing the professional ski side of it. But I'm also not banking on that 110%. I'm having stuff on the other end, talking to my brother about editing and getting connections to get work that way, where I'm like, if that doesn't happen, then I'm not going to be all sad and bummed about it. I'm going to move on. I'm going to do other things, but still love skiing so much. And I think there's just a way of doing multiple things at once to a certain extent. So yeah, I'm just going to keep honing the different areas that I enjoy doing, I think.
Man, well, I really love that attitude towards everything, because I came into this with like a preconceived notion of like, oh, we could be so much bigger if he did this, this, and this, because you look at your skiing, it's just like the power and the style and just the way that you go so big. And then just like the fact that you know how to ski for a camera. You grew up with Grant Gunderson.
Yeah, that was huge.
You know the angles, you know everywhere to be. It's like you were born to be a skier in the 90s. If you were in the 90s, right, they would tell you you're going to be on this film shoot and you're going to ski with this photographer and you would outwork everybody. You'd get a shit ton of stuff done. But when you look at skiing now, you have to have the social media part.
For sure.
And that's not really where you're comfortable in saying, look at me.
Yeah, no, that's spot on, man. I think it is true. I think I do kind of look fondly back on days where you could kind of let a ski part do the talking, which I grew up watching. I know your years in the industry, that was a big part of it, was just like in-person events and putting out an awesome movie and having a really good segment. And I do look back on that fondly, but I also like the ability to be able to share stuff right away. And I do think I'll probably start transitioning more so to like putting clips up quickly. Because at this point, I've talked to people about this all the time. Like one of my good friends, Colton Jacobs, who's a photographer, we talk about that a lot because, he posts all the time on Instagram and we chat about the value of quick posts versus a long piece. And at this point, I think I was kind of brought up in that generation of really trying to hold things to like a final piece, a segment or whatever. And these days, it just doesn't matter. You can do both. Like you could put something on Instagram and then have it in edit at the end of the season, So I think embracing that would be a good step and something that I'm actually been conscious about and trying to work on. So, I think there's a balance for sure between trying to build your social media presence, but also making yourself happy with creating something when it's all said and done that you're really stoked on.
Yeah. And even just thinking, because I'm just stuck on thinking that you were born to be a skier in the 90s, even thinking of the contests in like the 90s and early 2000s, like the cold rushes and the K2 back nines, those are all built for a skier like you. You're born a decade too late for all that shit and everything changed.
No, for sure. I've looked back on those comps like, man, I really wish that one of those would, we don't really have that anymore. It's like, what, Kings and Queens of Corbetts is like the closest thing. And I'm sorry, but I think that event is pretty ridiculous. It's sick and credit to everyone who's sending it, but it just seems like such a huck fest. Whereas like Cold Rush was so rad, like having the different facets too, having the like big mountain stuff and the jumps. And that was just so cool. And I've thought about trying to start doing the tour, but I didn't think about it very long. I don't really have very much interest in doing those kind of comps, but again, credit to people who are getting exposure that way and stepping into like really gnarly conditions and just like absolutely sending it. That's super sick. I always am so impressed. Like I tried to wake up the other morning and watch the first stop of the tour, and I woke up a little bit late, but was able to see some runs. And the conditions were, so-so. And I'm just like, damn, these people are going so hard on so-so conditions, which I think is freaking rad, man. Like I love seeing it, but it just wasn't quite what I wanted to do. So I do wish that some of those comps were still around because I think those were so unique. I think some of them are kind of popping up in Europe. Those guys are putting on cool events like that, but in the States, and it doesn't seem like we're seeing those kind of events much anymore. So it'd be sick to have those be revitalized.
Yeah, we need something like that just to kind of change it up a little bit. Because I don't know if you watched the X Games this past week, but
yeah,
it was kind of a joke in the way, given the riders delivered for sure. But just the way that they showed skiing and snowboarding was almost laughable a bunch of times. And that was kind of sad.
Yeah. I saw Todd Richards had a pretty good post about that.
Yeah, he did.
And it was just easy to see. I mean, without him pointing it out, it's just like, I was pretty much just watching the events themselves without watching much of the in-between stuff. But I saw clips of it and was seeing some of it while I was watching. They're definitely trying really hard to be hip, not just in the outdoor sports world, but like bringing influencers on board and stuff. And I get it. That's where the money's at in their minds, but it is also pretty cringy to watch, I think.
And one thing I will say, and I don't think Todd brought it up in his rant, But it's very important to note that in October, the X Games was sold. ESPN sold their majority interest in the X Games to MSP Capital, which is a venture capital firm. So really, the X Games, they've always been about making money. But now they're about making money for a bunch of suits who don't even care about the X Games. So.
Totally. People on the other end, on the receiving end of that, have a much different basis than it once did, I would think. And much different bottom lines, So, yeah, that changes over time, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's kind of bound to happen. I mean, it's like, as rad as the X Games are, I always wondered if it was going to be something that could really keep going forever. Like, is that something that is an event that's going to happen every year for as long as we can see? And I hope so. It's rad to have that in snow sports, but hopefully it doesn't lose its core and its roots too much. It's been such a rad thing for so many athletes over the years. I hope it stays somewhat true to itself, even though we see it changing right in front of our eyes.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first year I've ever watched the X Games and thought, wow, I think the Olympics did it better.
Yeah, seriously. I know, usually it's so the opposite. But yeah, times are changing.
And what's going to change here in this part of the podcast is we are at the end of your life and times, given we only scratched the surface a little bit because you've done so much in your times. But I have a segment in the show that I end every podcast with called Inappropriate Questions.
Okay.
With this, I get one of your friends to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. With you, you're only 26 years old, and I thought this podcast might not go super long because when you're 26, you haven't done a ton of shit in your life and times, but you've done a lot. So I was like, I'm going to get 2 people to ask inappropriate questions. That way, if our podcast doesn't go that long, then we're going to have some great questions from 2 different people.
Okay.
So I was able to get Sophia Rouches and then your brother to ask inappropriate questions.
Right on.
But Sophia's question, she only came up with 1, and it didn't turn out too inappropriate. So I'm going to start out with a question from Sophia, and then we're going to go with 3 inappropriate questions from your brother, and I'm going to cue them up right now. And here we go.
Okay.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Sophia Rouches, and I got some questions for my good friend Micah. So, Micah, you are one of the most dedicated skiers I know. You're very self-motivated, and I want to know how many times you think you get shut down in a season, and what motivates you to keep pushing despite getting skunked all the time.
Oh, man. Super accurate. Yeah, not inappropriate, but just very on point. Doug and I, when we were working on that Bourne film, we had so many days of just getting absolutely fucking clagged out every day. And we just dude, this is just has to be skunked the movie. Every day we go out, we hike for 2 hours and just sit in fog. So, it's an ongoing challenge for me. I think I'm kind of haunted by foggy conditions. So, how I bounce back from it, just trying to not lose my mind in the fog and try to have it go better another day. Holding on for hope is about as close as it can get for making your way out of the absolute clagged out conditions and trying to come back and get it again. But that is a constant thing, and she's been around for that several times, so we know how it goes when we're trying to get out together, and it's just absolute shit conditions. So that's just very much a part of the experience of trying to film at Mount Baker.
So when you're a Northwest kid and you're filming in the fog all the time, in the rain, in the shitty conditions, eventually you just start putting clips like that in the movie, right? You can't always wait for sun, I would think.
Yeah, you have to, man. I mean, you just got to take what you can get. I mean, there's one clip specifically that will always stand out to me. In Bourne, I landed a triple bag.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it was we had this jump set up, and I knew I wanted to try that off it. We were just sitting there for 2 or 3 hours. And Doug was posted up across the valley, just freezing his ass off. And I'd be like, all right, dude, we're going to wait 15 more minutes. And I could just tell he was like, dude, I'm so over it at this point. And eventually you either just got to try, work with what you have or call it a day. So there's been plenty of clips where that one was probably my proudest moment of a foggy day and putting something down. But yeah, it's always going to be a part of the experience, I think.
And clips like that, those are ones that I think, have those ever made your social media?
I think they're on there. Usually it's after I post the video.
For sure.
And I'll do a few reels from the video, but that triple's on there. Some of the clips from Bourne are on there. And I kind of want to do a little revival edit, some short reels of putting clips together from different years. I've kind of been thinking, because I got hard drives here of just so much old footage. And I would like to bring some of that back and do kind of weekly posts of that stuff with a little story about them. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff over the years that I have tried to post, but could also be brought back to, people who weren't following me at the time or anything like that. So it's cool to bring that stuff back to the surface.
Nice. Now we're going to jump into your brother's Inappropriate Questions. He's down there in LA working with Step Studios. It's Nick Martini, who's been on the podcast. Nick was one of those Step kids.
Yep.
He was on Solomon forever and always one of the more progressive crews in skiing when it came to urban. Then Nick went down and started this whole video house down in LA, and it's huge. And your brother's one of the key editors with that whole program. And he's come up with 3 questions, and here is his first one.
Yo, what's up, Micah? Hope you're doing well. Mike reached out and asked me to ask you some questions for this podcast. So yeah, here's 3 kind of funny, inappropriate questions. Hope you dig them. Can you tell us about some of your fits as a kid, specifically in regards to the pink boots you used to wear almost constantly when we were growing up?
There we go. So you had style as a kid as well, it sounds like.
Good one. Yeah, that style's been clearly lifelong. Yeah, being a little gremlin of Glacier, you could just kind of run around and, rock whatever fit you wanted since there's no one around. And I think up until I was probably, when I was probably 3, 4, 5, we have some pretty funny old like VHS videos of me and my brother running around the yard. And my fit was for, a few days. We got some good videos of me just rocking these like pink rain boots that are like mid shin high, a cape, like a Batman type cape, and nothing else. And just being a 6-year-old kid in Glacier, who gives a shit, right? Like there's no one around, but just running around the yard, probably being a pretty fired up kid.
Jumping in puddles and being a Glacier kid.
A lot of energy. Yeah, absolutely. We got funny photos my parents would take, and we just have these little woods by our house, and I'd be rocking next to nothing, and there's like a bunch of like stinging nettles and shit, but apparently I just was in my Hobbit mind and didn't care much. So yeah, funny times. Yeah, the pink boots, they need to make a comeback.
So funny fits growing up, but now with OR, because I'm on the OR program as well, it's
cool.
Like all of their stuff has changed, and it's like really, really cool now.
So much, man. I've been on the program for about 3 years now, and I think it was really at that time where it kind of turned from being a dad brand, the products they were putting out, to like actually making some really cool fits and really cool patterns and stuff. And I think it's really changed for the best for them, and the quality's been really good. I have nothing but positive things to say about their gear. So stoked to see that change, and things are getting a little longer. Like I don't have to get like an XL jacket for my 5'7" self anymore. I can get like a regular size jacket and it fits well. But yeah, it's cool to see that. And they've been a rad brand to work with over the last few years.
Speaking of, we haven't talked about who pays you to ski. Who are your sponsors?
I work with Outdoor Research, and that's how I make most of my income as a skier, is my retainer with them, which has been really career changing actually over the last 2 seasons. To have a pretty solid retainer has been super awesome. And then Faction, who I've been skiing with for about 5 or 6 years, I have a retainer with them as well. Those are like my main 2 sponsors. BCA I ride for, and Cast I've been riding for the last few years as well.
Okay.
I saw their product, probably 3 years ago now, when they were kind of first doing that free tour setup, and it really caught my eye. At the time, I was doing so much boot packing just around Baker because I like wanted to ski on pivots. And I had the old like BCA Trekker bindings.
Right, the day wreckers.
Yeah, the day wreckers. Yeah, freaking brutal, man. But yeah, that's how I was getting around. And then I reached out to those guys too. I was just like, hey, like, love the product, would love to try it out. And pretty much have just talked to Silas, who's one of the Cast brothers, over the phone, and yeah, build a good relationship with them and love what they're doing. So that's pretty much it right now. I'm kind of in the hunt for a goggle and helmet sponsor right now. Just plugging myself there a little bit.
Nice. So I think you should do some of those sponsor me videos and send them out, and I bet you could get one.
Absolutely. If I get some pink boots back, it'll really change the game.
Send a picture of you in a cape and those boots, and you might get a sponsor right there.
And just nothing else. Just an email with just that. They're like, okay, block this guy. What the hell is this shit?
You say, all I'm missing is eyewear and a helmet, and I'm good to go.
Like, come on, that would complete the outfit. Yeah. So I've connected with some people who, are on Anon and stuff, and have pointed me in direction for contact there. So I think that could be a cool step. But yeah, hopefully I can make a little time to make some more connections this spring and into the off season too. Question,
is it Anon or Anon?
I don't know. Okay. I just threw out Anon out of my ass just now. I have no idea. I used to say Anon. It's one of those things. Like, I've heard both with like Giro and Gyro, but I think now I know it's Giro.
Yep.
So there's one of those brands where I'll just always just kind of guess.
All right, let's go with his next inappropriate question.
Question number 2, and I think this is almost just more of a cool story. Can you just talk about the last time we were in Japan together and what it was like to go to Fukushima, with some of the stuff that happened where we went off the hill, and then also some of the cooler skiing related stories from that trip?
That was a really cool edit that your brother put together. I think it won a bunch of awards as well.
Yeah, it was beautiful, man. That was such a cool trip.
So you guys went to Fukushima. This is where the reactor almost blew, and there's radioactive shit everywhere, and there's tons of great documentaries that are kind of like Chernobyl. And what did you see?
I mean, shit, I feel like I could start rehashing this trip and talk about it for a long time, but it was pretty mind-blowing. First of all, we'd been to Japan. I think that was just my second trip, but we had gone the first year and kind of done more of the classic Japan trip. We spent some time in Miyako and stuff, and a lot of tourists and stuff in those parts. But Fukushima was cool because we were kind of the only foreigners there, which was pretty eye-opening and cool. And then just seeing the town and stuff and what it had gone through was pretty mind-blowing. And one day we went to like the site of where the reactor blew, and like they were still just like burying bags of radioactive soil and just like burying them in the ground. Like we were driving down the road and they're just like truck after truck of just like soil fill. I think that's what they're doing, because we went and saw like the excavator and they're just like digging up soil and like getting it out of there even to this day. And it's just in ruin, man. I mean, it's really not like a funny story, but it is a mind-blowing story and a really, wild experience. It was crazy to see the destruction that happened from that, but just an amazing trip, because on the ski side of things, we were able to connect with these 2 local snowboarders, and they were kind of able to tell us their story of what it was like being there at the time with their families. And they're just absolute shredders too, and just like the nicest guys in the world. So they were able to show us some of their favorite spots around the local hill. And, we just had so much fun following them around and loosely communicating with each other the whole time, mostly just through fist bumps. And then doing like interviews with them and having them speak in Japanese and tell their story was just a really cool experience. Like, one of those trips that you really only do once a lifetime, even maybe. So super special, super fond memories of being with Mattias and Sophia for that. So yeah, good trip, lots of laughs, lots of eye-opening shit. Really cool one.
When something terrible happens like that, I won't say it's cool to see. It's interesting to see the aftermath of all of that, and to see it from a kid your age who's kind of got a shared vision with a lot of people that I know. It's nice to see your guys' take on it and perspective on it, which is pretty cool. So
yeah, agreed.
Let's jump into his final inappropriate question.
Alrighty.
At what point did you realize or know that you were a much better skier than I am?
Oh boy.
I don't know if that took you long, or I'm kind of curious, like, honestly, like how old were you when you figured that out?
I love that, man. It's going to hurt our relationship though, because I knew it right off the bat. No, I'm kidding. There was this phase, I think, where, he was a much stronger skier than I was, being 3 years older than me. And then it was like when I was probably 14 or 15, I think, and I kind of got a little bit bigger and started to kind of get a little bit stronger, kind of come into myself more as a younger man instead of like a kid. I think it started to click. And I think it was at that point, I don't remember a definitive time where I'm like, oh, dude, the fuck, I'm way better than Mattias now. Like, what's he doing? He's like a really good skier to this day. And I love seeing it because he'll like come up from LA and rip around Baker. And I'm like, dude, you haven't skipped a beat. Like, still absolutely shredding.
He was a sponsored skier too, right? Was he on Vocal or something?
Yeah, he was. He like rode with Vocal for a few years, I think. And yeah, he had some sponsors, but I think he just realized that he liked editing more. So he transitioned. But I think I was probably 15-ish. And I don't know. I don't have like a real memory of it because it wasn't like something I was like, oh, I need to be better than him. But I think I was just like, had a little bit more natural ability. He's probably 6 inches taller than I am. And I think being short helps. Unlike some of the amazing tall skiers that there are out there, I think being 5'7", 5'8" gives you certainly an advantage. And
yep.
I had the kind of skier build and package there in terms of my height. So I think at that point, it's kind of started clicking, and then I was able to get a little better than old Mattias, the old boy.
All right. Yep. Well, that is Inappropriate Questions, and that is our podcast. And when I look at your life and times, it's like you were born to be in the mountains. And if you would have asked me before this podcast, I would say you were born to be a pro skier. But skiing is just something you do, it seems like. It's like something you do it really well. It's a passion of yours, but it doesn't define you. It's like there's other things in your life, and given I didn't even find out what they were, because it sounds like skiing is a pretty big part of it. But It's refreshing to have a kid like you who isn't all about like, I have to be a super famous pro skier, dude, because it seems like it's not the last thing that you want to happen, but you don't care either way. You've got these experiences and no one can ever take that away from you. And I thank you for your time, man.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you saying that, man. It's cool to just kind of bring something else to the, ideology of what it means to be a pro skier. So I like sharing that, and being able to connect with you has been really fun. So I appreciate the call and for reaching out and everything.
So that was time with Micah Evangelista, and I went into this one thinking that Micah was a super talented kid who didn't have the drive to become a big name pro. And I thought the reason was maybe that he didn't know the right path to make it happen. But that's not the case at all. Micah just wants to go skiing or work on a project or do whatever. It seems like he doesn't really care about being pro, and that's a different mentality than most people that come on the show. The norm is that you have this want to be pro or be sponsored, and maybe there's ego involved in that. Maybe it's just the dream. But with Micah, it's like he knows super prodom is a possibility, and if it happens, that's great. But if not, that's okay too. But you could hear it in his voice. He should be posting old clips and be active on social media, because if you're a dude with as much talent as Micah, you don't want to be asking yourself when you're 49 years old, what if I would have done more when I was younger? Micah's only 25, and he still has a lot of time to make it happen if he wants to. And listeners, if you're an up-and-comer and you want to make the dream happen, know that not all pros are focused 100% on skiing, and Micah is the perfect example. You can still do school, have a job, and do all kinds of other shit, and still be a pro skier. But if you want to be an A-lister, yeah, you need to be 100% focused. But not everyone aspires to be the next Carl Fossvet. And today, Micah is proof of that, and it'll be interesting to see what his future holds. And with every interview, there's a bunch of things that I miss. And with Micah, I didn't talk about his time on K2, I didn't talk about growing up with Adam Yu, I didn't talk about money, but I really stayed away from money because I'm also guessing that Micah's never been able to just ski. Like, there's always had to have been some sort of side hustle for his current level of proness. But I didn't ask, so my bad. That's the podcast. Now it's time for the review of the week. And it comes from Dan with a dog named Lucy. It's a 5-star review, and here it goes. Mike is a fabulous and insightful interviewer. He clearly has the depth of knowledge in all facets of the ski snow sports world, which is entertaining and insightful. But his conversations are well planned, and his research of his guests is tremendous. You get a full and entertaining conversation to enjoy every time. Easily one of the best podcasts around and the best in this genre. Well, thank you very much, Dan with a dog named Lucy, for that review. Reading ones like that really make me feel good about myself. You can also put bad reviews out there if you don't like me, but good reviews are going to get favoritism and they are going to get read first. So Dan, I thank you so much for that. Please email me your mailing address to mike@thepowellmovement.com, and I'm going to send you a custom limited edition Powell Movement item. I've got a few different ones to choose from, and it all depends on how I'm feeling that day, what I'll ship out. But you can bet it's going to be awesome. For anybody else that wants to win something awesome from the Powell Movement, or just help the show grow, please subscribe wherever you listen and review me on iTunes or on Spotify. If I read your review on the show, you will win a limited edition Powell Movement item. Finally, please support the amazing brands that make this thing happen. They are Elon Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Puffin Drinkware, Outdoor Research, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.